Welcome everyone to our webinar on demystifying go-to-market engineering. How on earth does it drive growth? This is a topic that keeps coming up as it seems there is general confusion about this new role. What does it mean and how does it differ from RevOps? I'm Nicola, co-founder of CMO Circle and partner at Growth&Company, and I am very much looking forward to getting some clarity from our three experts. And an interesting fact for you, according to the Bible of Oren, there are only 1,300 people globally with the GTM engineering job title versus about 7,500 in RevOps, which is still less than I thought there'd be actually. But before we hand over to our experts, please do introduce yourselves in chat. And I would really like to know, are you thinking about hiring a GTM engineer, or do you in fact already have one? And please do ask questions as we go. We'll either address them in the flow or we'll come to them at the end. So without further ado, let's get some intros. Oren, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I started the origination of my career as a performance marketer, fun enough, SEO and PPC back in the day, and then got pulled into B2B as a result of my growth of LinkedIn, funny enough, of all things. And yeah, worked with mostly B2B SaaS companies, fintech companies, quite a broad range, some like typically like 50 mil ARR, probably be my sweet spot at the moment. Yeah, I love building stuff. So I spend my days in Cursor with Python scripts and Google Colab and marketing automation, CRMs, CROs and CMOs, supporting and building engines for growth. So I spend a lot of time with messing around with data.
And building me wonderful agents to see whether I can be a GTM engineer. Perfect.
Yes.
Mahak, over to you.
So I'm Mahak. I run Revology Consulting. I've been in operations for about 13 years now, and I've done, if you can think of an operations role, I've done it. So I've been a business analyst, I've done project management, I've done sales enablement, I've done sales operations, and then RevOps was invented, and I was like, hey, that's RevOps. So I started that. Now I work with B2B companies, and I help reduce the cost of revenue.
Always a wonderful thing to be doing. And Tom?
Hi everyone, I'm Tom. I am currently the Vice President of Go-to-Market Operations and Solution Engineering at HiveBrite. And up until 2 months ago, I worked for Pavilion HQ as VP of Operations. So some of you may recognize me. I'm really excited to chat to you all today.
And we miss you, Tom, at Pavilion. We do.
Miss you all too.
So let's start off with the basics. Mahak, what would be your definition of what GTM engineering actually is, and why is it important right now?
Muted. Mahak, muted.
Muted.
So basic. All right. I just want to say that before we look at go-to-market engineering, let's look at RevOps, because that's where go-to-market started from. And like I just said, RevOps is still fairly new, right? It's like, 3 years old at this point? And it was going to be the intersection of sales ops, marketing ops, and CS ops. And it was supposed to see the entire end-to-end flow and find where the gaps are. It still does, but go-to-market engineering is now the automation that sits on top of it to help reduce the manual workload. So it's basically RevOps meets AI.
And why has it suddenly become so important?
Because AI blew up in the last, year, 2 years? And everyone wants to be part of it. So now there's this brand new role. And I also think that it's really difficult to be in a role like RevOps, right? Your RevOps is traditionally always firefighting. So to be in a role where you are so busy at work, you don't have time to go and learn new skills like vibe coding and how to use AI properly and all of these things. And I think that's where go-to-market really started, like engineering really started. When you merge the two together, it creates go-to-market operators, which we will come back to on a different day.
Go-to-market engineering, RevOps, and go-to-market operators. Okay. Now, I always love a bit of discussion here. So I'm keen to know, Tom, do you have the same view?
I do, largely. I think, however, I have a maybe controversial spin, which is
I love controversial spins.
I think for many organizations, they're still adopting revenue operations, and the dream of revenue operations has never really been realized. And there's a shiny new toy out there called Clay. And for a lot of people, Clay's kind of accelerated this move towards go-to-market engineering. For many revenue operations people, they have a background in soft skills, whether it's sales or marketing. They don't have backgrounds in computer engineering or in heavyweight technological skill sets. And while the original dream of revenue operations was to be able to solve things through using the CRM and other more accessible applications, I think anyone who's got really deep into data architecture has realized you probably need a skill set in some pretty heavyweight things in order to be able to rebuild your entire data architecture to actually get your duplicate rules to work. And so I think the real challenge that has arisen over the last few years, especially as there's more and more and more technology, is RevOps has had to become more and more technological. They've needed to understand more technologies and have deeper tech skills. And there are some people in revenue operations leadership who have failed to adapt to that. And so go-to-market engineering has risen to fill in that gap. So I do think they're fundamentally different roles, but I think the genesis of GTM engineering as a concept has come from a place of revenue operations not being able to span the full gap that I personally believe it should be able to span.
So do you think that means it's redefining what RevOps is as well?
I think it's maybe it's forcing RevOps to have a bit of a reality check on what most RevOps teams are truly capable of. Previous to HiveBrite and Pavilion, I built a career on going into companies and fixing distressed CRMs that have been built by poor revenue operations and sales operations teams. And I've always felt quite strongly that the skills that most operators have don't match up to the job specs that they're doing, and that all the strategy and process in the world doesn't fix it if you've got a bad data architecture. And so I think there's this kind of like reckoning almost that's happening now, and you see the amount of impact some go-to-market engineers can have on organizations. But I do think the right RevOps person could have had the same impact. They just never hired the right RevOps person.
Okay.
They were
So
looking
filling
for
the gap.
place.
So if
Exactly.
RevOps was actually doing the proper job it should do, you wouldn't need go-to-market engineers. Interesting. Oren, what's your view on this? Do you agree
Yeah.
with?
So I think, unlike Mahak and Tom, I'm not a RevOps guy, and I don't have the same background or experience. I come from a very different direction of performance marketing and ABM and B2B strategy, etc. My view on go-to-market engineering, now that I kind of do a lot of it, is it's a merge of workflow automation, AI in its foundation, a background in cold email outbound, and touching on kind of demand generation, where I think traditionally a lot of people think of RevOps as stitching up the data between the marketing automation and the CRM and maybe your CDP, your customer data platform, etc. And more of like a data integration flow, a really almost like a sales enablement for role that connects marketing ops and sales ops and therefore created revenue ops. So I reckon fundamentally go-to-market engineering is popularized because of Clay.com, Cargo, and all these players in that space because of AI. And I think that is the wave. I think the skills are different. I think a really good RevOps, from what I've just heard, would have been able to have taken over that definition of that function. But there's only about 7,500 RevOps people out there. So it's quite a small pool of folk to have picked from in order to upgrade to begin with. So they're both quite nascent or niche. And I think there's just, like we have that in marketing, like you have growth marketing and you have like growth hacking, and you've got these walls, and like, what is the definition of these different, philosophies or points of view? I think there's a lot of that is happening in B2B. I think it is important to note that the proliferation of go-to-market as a term is more prolific in SaaS and B2B and fintech than other industries where it's a very niche culture, and therefore like go-to-market engineering and RevOps as well are more niche and more topical to those specific industries. A lot of people in B2B don't fully understand or get why is it called go-to-market and not called marketing, right? And there's like a lot of pneumoculture that's happening, and this is why there's so much confusion.
And so, Oren, let's say my founder is saying, "Oh, Nicola, you've got to go and hire a GTM engineer. This is critical for the business, new shiny thing." What are actually the real benefits, and how do I know whether this is something we as a business need or whether it's something I should push back on?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to AI capabilities and what AI can do and how it can help with the business. So if you look at some of the core capabilities of Clay, like CRM enrichment at scale, which would have been very manual or painful beforehand, or doing account level research to provide a brief to any before they jump on a call, an account executive, then AI does these things at scale more efficiently and effectively than previously. There's all this thing now with signals and picking up signals and being smart about picking that up in order to curate, build lookalike audiences. All of this is kind of part of this wave in go-to-market engineering that's growing. But fundamentally, I think a lot of it comes down to efficiency gains, where you can do something that, work that I did for clients that would have taken me months, I can do now, not in weeks, but in hours, and so, like even a couple of days. So it's just the ability to stitch up data, clean data, integrate data, and activate that data quickly to drive growth, either with existing customers, CRM data, or for prospecting, be that aligning your marketing and sales team with account-based marketing, or just enrichment in CRM or activating on signals. So I think those are the primary benefits that I'm seeing. I think a lot of it, remember, there is a legacy which is still applicable. I'd say, if you ask, I'd say 40 to 60% still of all go-to-market engineers still think of themselves essentially cold email outbound. I'm going to throw in LinkedIn in there as well. So LinkedIn and cold email outbound bundle, and that is a legacy that is kind of shifting now with Clay's enhanced capabilities. But I'd say a lot of people are still doing that.
Right. Tom, from your side, at HiveBrite, how are you thinking about the benefits of go-to-market engineering?
Yeah, I think we're going through a restructure, let's call it. There's a new sheriff in town, me, and we are centralizing a lot of the way we do things. So when I got here, we had separate CS operations to sales operations. We had a team called revenue operations that actually did growth operations. We didn't really have like a centralized point of view on go-to-market as an architecture or a strategy. And so I'd start by saying that businesses need outcomes, they don't need people. Often the way to those outcomes is people, but I no longer believe the only way to those outcomes is people. So a lot of what I'm doing is going through the outcomes that we need to achieve in 2026 and working back from that into what the team structure needs to be across sales, marketing, CS, solutions engineering, and also revenue operations. And looking at the skills that we also need to infuse into it, it's very likely that we need to start building go-to-market engineering capability. It's very likely that I'll start doing many of the projects and build them out and then hire someone to look after them, because I'd always prefer to build it myself and get someone else in to maintain it, at least to start with. It's much cheaper to hire someone who can maintain than can build. I think it gives us a lot of opportunities to do things like Oren said at scale, and do things that become really repeatable and almost become quite formulaic. But I also think that this is really new. Like, HiveBrite is a really awesome organization, but 90% of our own customers are traditional businesses that probably don't even really want to touch AI with a barge pole. Most of our customers are in higher education, non-profit. A small number of them are big corporations that are doing really cool things with community. But we've even got to be thinking about the AI features that we develop, because it's not seen as a positive in every industry the way it is in SaaS. So it's quite an interesting time for me balancing the dichotomy of like how the customers view AI development and me being like, why would you do that? And AI could have done that. Why did you spend 20 minutes doing that? You could do it in 1 minute. And trying to infuse a culture into the team of like creative laziness. Like, if something's going to take you a long time, really question whether you should be doing it or whether it could be done a lot faster by the AI. I think once we get to the point, I've rolled out the mindset and built some of the tools, then we'll start hiring. And I probably won't call the role a GTM engineer. What I'm going to do to have some fun is put up a RevOps analyst role and a GTM engineer role and see which one of them gets me the person I need.
Oh, we're going to come on to that skill set.
Yes, we are.
And I also love this new phrase, creative laziness. I think I might be stealing that one. Mahak, when do you actually know if you need one? Because you know what it's like. Oh, GTM engineering, I must get one. But do I actually really need one? Am I going to get the value from them? Or do I already have that skill set in the business anyway?
This happened with RevOps. So people started hiring RevOps, specifically in the US, and then it kind of trickled down to the UK, and now it's starting to go over. But people were like, okay, the biggest companies are hiring RevOps, so I need RevOps. So they took their sales operations person and renamed them as RevOps. Or they took their CRM admin and renamed them as RevOps. And I think we're going to see that with GTM engineers as well. We're going to have RevOps that now suddenly become GTM engineers. In terms of when you need one, map out the processes first. So if you have defined processes, you know the exact steps that let's take sales as an example, because that's where GTM engineers tend to support most. If your salespeople have their exact step-by-step documented, and you know how long everything takes, and you know that there's work that's manual, and when I say manual, like 15 minutes, if it takes you 15 minutes to do a task, automate it. That's when you bring in a GTM engineer to add that automation in. But you might already have that skill set with RevOps, which really RevOps should have. Because if as RevOps, you need to stay on top of all the technology anyway. And I understand, like I said at the beginning, it's difficult to keep up with everything, but I think all of us are feeling behind on AI right now. If you have someone that understands how tech should talk to each other, how to not have a bloated tech stack, how to add automation in, you already have a GTM engineer. Just need to rename them. Otherwise, hire one.
So I think what could be an interesting thing to track, Oren, is how many RevOps people rename themselves GTM engineers over the next 6 months. I think that could be a really interesting data point. But let's say, yes, I do think I need one. How on earth do I find one? There's 1,300 out there. What's the skill set I should be looking for? Because I'm also imagining anyone with that job title, there's going to be a lot of people chasing them. So are there other areas I should be looking at, skill sets where they might be working in a different department, different function?
So when I'm hiring, I hire for, is this person going to be a fit in the company? And is the skill set something that can be taught? So saying that, you do need to be comfortable with AI. You need to have some kind of background with it. You need to be comfortable with tech, and you need to be a continuous learner. If you're going to be one of those people that I have 20 years of experience and I can bring all of that in, but I'm too old to learn anymore or do any more courses, probably not going to be the best fit. But someone who is continuously learning, is curious, I think that's where I would start. But honestly, again, it's so new, it's going to depend on exactly the use case that you're hiring for, I think, in my mind.
So Tom, when you're thinking about doing these two job specs, GTM engineer versus RevOps, see who comes in, what skill set are you specifically looking for and how are you going to test for it?
A great question. So I hire specifically for one thing, which is a spark of genius, which is phenomenally difficult to find. But I know exactly what I mean, and I will try to explain it to everyone. So to be really successful, whether it's in GTM engineering or revenue operations or data architecture or ecosystemic design, even solution engineering, what you need is a specific way of thinking through problems. It's not thinking about problems, but through them, and a way of serializing any problem. You need to be able to think, okay, step one is blah, blah, blah. And you need to be very good at thinking through, well, that could go wrong in this use case, so I would do this. There are probably 100 ways to solve nearly any problem in most companies when it comes to systems, especially if you've got a large system stack, which, because of system sprawl, most people do. But they're not all the correct answer, even though they get to the right outcome. Some of them won't be scalable, some of them will be hard to enable, some of them will be hard to track. And so I'm always trying to find that spark of genius in a person where I can see the cogs in their brain working and I can see them thinking through the problem. So most of my interviews involve two things: incredibly vague interview tasks, and then seeing whether they ask me the right questions, because most of us work with people who are very vague. They're called sales leaders, and they don't have very clear ways of describing what they want. And a part of our role is to pull that out of them. Often company targets are many miles removed from an individual's targets, and it needs translating down. All great RevOps and GTM engineers need to be great interrogators. So that's part of it, is will they ask me questions to start to penetrate the vagueness? And then secondarily, can they ultimately do something that's poorly defined but get to a pretty good outcome? So I try to find a question that has no true correct answer. I normally try to always give them data. I will purposely corrupt different parts of the data. I love to reformat a date into a number so it doesn't look like a date, but anyone who's worked with data for a long time knows any 5-digit number that starts with a 4 is probably a date. I will then try to put misspellings in, and I'll use AI to break all my perfect data and reintroduce all the things I've removed in the past, just so I can see whether someone goes through and they're like, okay, I've got a data set. The data set needs to be cleaned. It needs to be processed. It needs feature engineering. It needs to be categorized. Now it needs to be pivoted and built into a table. Now I can understand the data and I can answer Tom's first 3 questions, but I'm missing these 2 data points I would need to answer the next questions. So let me go and ask him if those exist. And if they don't exist, let me have a good assumption that is structured and well found, probably through AI research, to be able to answer it. And if they can do all of those things, I might hire them.
I never ever want to be interviewed by you, Tom. I'm so terrified.
I've been told that it's a really exciting but deeply terrifying experience.
Yeah, I think I'd focus more on the terrifying. So I'm not going to put my in that. Oren, I know you've done a bit of research into the skill sets that you look for in a GTM engineer versus RevOps. Would love to hear what you've discovered.
Sure. I actually have data that I pulled on this. I'm going to share my screen and share that with everyone. So here what you can see is a comparison of 1,308 profiles for revenue operations, RevOps, and the go-to-market engineers, GTM engineers. And you can see the skills by count with a percentage for each and then the difference. And what you can fundamentally see is, unsurprisingly, RevOps is very focused on business intelligence and reporting, so taking what's happening in the pipeline, what's happening with leads, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, visualizing that so leadership can see. Workflow automation, which if you ask me is a key part of go-to-market engineers, interesting enough seems to be very similar. Then you can see apparently software development. The RevOps tend to be more technically inclined, which is so interesting. Then process and operations, which is not surprising. Then you can see strategic planning, so kind of considered more strategic and more on the team leadership side. But then you can see AI implementation is where GTM engineers really shine in comparison to RevOps. Then outbound sales, like I mentioned, and demand generation is more of a focus. And unsurprisingly, you can see CRMs play a bigger part in RevOps as it would as it's a foundational piece of kit in comparison. So I think there's the most interesting skills and the comparison between the 2 functions. So if we were to summarize it, GTM's engineers are more AI focused, outbound focused, and demand generation focused, where RevOps tends to be more reporting focused, operations focused, CRM focused, and tends to have a propensity towards more strategy, which would, I reckon, is not a symptom of the function. It's a symptom of the size of company that the job titles are more common in. And there are more RevOps people and more likely to find RevOps people in mid-market and enterprise companies, where GTM engineers, there seems to be more of them in startups. So it's an earlier stage, more nascent term that implies maturity, which is why you can see the split. On the left-hand side, you can see the responsibilities, tech stack, and geo. I'm not going to get into that now, but I will send that later in the summary so you can deep dive into more data on the comparison.
Okay. Thanks, Oren. So, Oren, based on this, if I was a GTM engineer and I've just started my new gig, where would I begin? I mean, my immediate thought is I would need to do an audit, but what would I be looking at and looking for? I'm guessing starting with sort of workflow automation.
I think it really comes down, well, first you'd understand the commercial objectives, you'd understand the team members, what's happening, you'd understand the tech stack, then you'd definitely go into the data and understand what's going on in the CRM and the marketing automation platform. How clean is that data? How structured is it? Tom went into a really nice, very, very clear explanation of how to think about the data and how to look at it. And that's absolutely spot on in terms of the foundation. I think then you'd look at what can you do to generate as much revenue as quickly as possible? What is that? Is that because you're not following champions that are moving? Is that because, deals are falling through? Is that because some of the sales team are really weak and that you look at their pipeline and no one's ever looked at the pipeline by sales rep to see what's actually happening there? What is that insight from the data that tells you where the problem in like the leaky bucket is, and how can you plug that hole, where the biggest holes you can plug quickly? And I think only once you plug the bucket, then you worry about pouring more water in. And I think what a lot of people do, they do it in reverse. They kind of go, how do we get more ads, more distribution, more lead? And you're like, but the data's a mess and you can't work with it and you don't have any efficiency because sales cycles are long and there's multiple stakeholders and the buying committee is progressively complicated. And you need to have that level of insight in order to orchestrate, especially if we're talking enterprise deals or larger deals, right?
So often you're saying like, right, let's do some more outbound, let's just make it more personalized, but actually let's look at where the issues are first, because they could be further down the pipeline or there could be some other areas that need fixing. Otherwise, we're just, as you said, throwing more water at a leaky bucket.
I think this volume thing is a legacy, because if you think 15, 20 years ago, all the business leaders of today, the CEOs and people in their 50s and 60s, how would you generate B2B pipeline 20 years ago? You just like hit the phones, and the more volume you did, you'd have a predictable conversion rate. But what they haven't caught up with, a lot of them, is digital transformation. They haven't caught up with digital marketing, with the shift to inbound, with the drop in efficiency in this non-scalable approach. So I think it's a legacy thinking, which is the root cause of the problem in many orgs.
And Mahak, when you're going into businesses and supporting them, where are you starting?
Exactly there. We do an audit, which is a maturity assessment. We recently renamed it as reduce the cost of your revenue plan, because, and it's so basic to think, where does RevOps make the most, like the biggest dent, right? You bring in revenue, and then you have to reduce the cost of these tasks. So if you imagine all the tasks that are going on within a company that bring in revenue, there are buckets that are going to create revenue, and then there are funnels or leaks that are going to be the costs. So if you are sitting on a dialer for 10 minutes waiting for someone to pick up the phone, that is a cost and it's not giving you revenue. If you are sending out a proposal, that is going to be a revenue task. So how do we get rid of the costs so that we have more time to focus on the revenue? So our maturity assessment looks at how much automation is there, what kind of workflows do you have, but also things like, are the people aligned with what you're trying to achieve? If marketing has KPIs that they're trying to go for that don't match the KPIs that sales are trying to hit, and RevOps is trying to be in the middle of both and trying to do both, it's not going to be an efficient process. So are your people aligned to the overall vision? And then are the processes aligned to this vision, which I just explained? And then the tech. It is so easy to get to tech flow. There are so many new things that are coming in. And we're like, okay, we're going to go and try this cool new thing. We're going to pay our monthly subscription. But you already have 2 other things that already do it. So how does that all work? And then also, there is tech that is, everyone is improving, right? So are you getting the most out of the tech stack as well? So if your process, for example, for a call is, I have to sit on a call, then I have to get the transcript, and I have to either manually write the notes, or I might use AI to write these notes up. Then I have to open my Gmail, then I have to copy the notes, paste them in, and then I have to manually find who was in it, and then I have to send. That's a really long process. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to find. How long is it taking you to do basic tasks? And what does the overall structure of the workflow look like? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's a really detailed audit. And sometimes it's those things that you don't even realize you're spending time on, that you're like, well, hang on a minute, why are you doing this?
Yeah. So we worked with this one company, and just, it was like little gaps that they had. They used SalesLoft and they used HubSpot, and the data didn't match. So we went in and just matched the data, and just by not clicking on tabs the whole time, because we asked people to tell us about their time savings, they save 50 hours a month. 50 hours a month. That's an extra week of work, more than that, a month, just by plugging these little gaps, because that's where inefficiencies are. It's like little inefficiencies that build up. That's where the cost comes from. So that's what we try and figure out first, and then you know what the plan is.
And Tom, you've not been at HiveBrite that long. So if you put on your GTM engineering hat, because I know you cover all of these elements, How did you go about assessing the business and where you wanted to spend time and where you could have the greatest impact?
Yeah, I always start from targets. I'm a simple man. I like knowing whether the revenue is 100% of target or not. And then I went through like every single team's performance against target over the last 2 years, and I started to look for where the holes might be. So uh, it's not like the most creative way of solving the problem, but ultimately I need to also make sure we're hitting all the targets for our board so that I look amazing. And if I can get us to hitting all the targets, I have succeeded. So I always start with the end. So start with CS, look through retention, try to understand GRR and NRR, try to understand like, are we are we a team that's really good at relationship building? So we've got high GRR. Are we good at selling? Like, can we get good NRR? How are we doing overall on revenue multiplication through the length of a relationship? I'll look into the average growth of a customer after signing, and then I'll backtrack into sales and try and figure out if the sales process is setting all of that up. Then backtrack into marketing and see whether we're getting enough leads to kind of get the sales team to their target. I try to stay away from tactics and just look at the overall mechanics of the go-to-market organization and how they all fit together. And ultimately, how do we generate revenue? And then once I've got a good understanding of that, I think I can normally see which parts of the engine need some sprucing up, and that will be where I start. So at the moment, we're atomizing all our targets and building a backworked model from all of the 2026 targets into what we need as the individual output of every member of the GTM organization, and quoting everyone that works in any form of customer or growth role. Even my entire team will essentially be quoted. They won't have like their own sales targets, but everyone knows which part of the sales target they own the accuracy for, which forecast they own the accuracy for, which numbers they own. And I believe that ownership drives accountability and accountability drives performance. So once I've kind of finished all of that, which has taken me a while, I've been here about 60 days, and we'll be going through all of that to get it finalized next week. The other thing I've done is rebuild pricing, rebuild the structure of the customer success team. I stay very high level for my first kind of 90 days. I won't get into the weeds until I've been there at least a quarter. I try to make sure strategy is fully aligned before anything else. And I think it's what kind of really brings me back to, if you've got the right architecture, everything after that is easy. If you've got the wrong architecture, everything is really difficult. And regardless of whether you're in a GTM leadership role, regardless of whether you're a CMO, a CRO, a blah, 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 or you're in RevOps, or you're in go-to-market engineering, the number one most important thing is understanding the mechanics of the entire GTM unit and how it all needs to be working. And as the leader of go-to-market operations or revenue operations or go-to-market engineering, the more you understand that, own it, arbit it, and enforce it, the more successful your organization will be. And so as long as you've got that like big picture and you know everything should be working, the easiest thing then is to say, well, that's not working, let's fix that. So if we can't hit the lead number with marketing alone, I need to go and build an automated outbound model. Now that's easy for me. That'll take me a couple of days and I'll be done with it. But there's no point me doing that if marketing is producing enough leads for us to be 100% inbound, because instead I could be figuring out how we improve negotiation rates and pull close rate up from 30 to 33%. So for me, it all comes down to having that picture of your revenue engine, and just like a mechanic would, finding exactly what's not working and figuring out if I'm revamping the part, changing the part out, getting a whole new engine. You never know, but
So, Tom,
you've got.
what's really interesting is you said that actually you need to allow 60 days for this. And I think one of the problems we have when we bring in a new resource, we expect impact pretty quickly. And actually, you need to let this person, this GTM engineer, however they're going to be working, really have the time, space, and support from the business to be able to do this. Because if they don't have a proper, accurate picture, which could take longer in some businesses than others, depending on what the setup is, they're not going to be able to do their best work. And out of interest, where have you found the biggest, I'm going to call them opportunities, when you've done this big audit?
Um, there's been a huge opportunity with marketing to put more into the pipeline for sales. We're currently 100% inbound, which is really exciting. But we also don't necessarily always hit 100% of target. We're pretty close, but like we need to go to more of an abundance mindset with leads than a scarcity mindset. And we're very much at the point where like we can hit the target, but it's going to be a journey to get there. Secondarily, I've had a huge amount of success already with honestly just closing some of the deals myself, which I wouldn't recommend for every revenue operations leader, but it is a skill in my wheelhouse. And so I just closed two of the biggest deals the company's ever done, which always helps to prove immediate impact. But all of that comes from a fundamental understanding of how a deal gets done. And I actually see it as an enablement opportunity for the whole sales team. So we're now retraining the sales team on some of the skills that I think we're missing, most of them to do with just like closing at the very end of it.
Right. It so far and then like falling down at that last hurdle.
Exactly. Like they're brilliant at solutioning, they're brilliant at negotiating. Getting through a paper process has been hard because they've got no ability to affect InfoSec and I can affect InfoSec. So, you know.
And Tom, was the perception of where the gaps were the actual reality?
No, not at all.
What did they actually think the problem was?
They thought some of the problems were the people. Some of the people were brilliant. They just had terrible managers. They also thought that a lot of the problems were operational. They're not. They're strategic. And resetting everyone and pulling them back up to the bow tie, like thank you to Winning by Design for coming up to the bow tie, was really, really effective because I literally built a 60-page, a 60-slide deck on the bow tie model, and everywhere we needed to improve our alignment to it to fix the revenue engine, and immediately could feel the impact. The biggest impact I've had is just that for most of the CS and sales team, like sales is a confidence sport, and they now feel confident that we understand the problems and we're making proactive steps towards solving them. But also, we understand the problem isn't that big. We're doing a lot of things well. And I think one of the great things about bringing direct RevOps leadership is I can actually say, you know what, we've got 70% of this correct. We're doing a really great job. None of you need to worry about this. Just go and close all your deals for me. I'll handle the other 30%. And that feels really good as like a new leader.
So actually, it's not always that we want to highlight where the challenges are, but also where we're doing really well.
Yeah.
When you go into businesses with your GTM engineering hat on, how do you approach it? How do you manage the audit?
Who was the question for?
That's for you, Oren.
Sorry, I didn't hear my name. I always take a parallel approach between like reviewing systems and people. And I think it's really interesting what Tom was saying is like they thought some of the problems are the people, and I tell you there's generally a common bias to think that the people are the problem. And in lots of different people I speak to, it's like that person's not strong enough, or we've got the wrong person, or that person's a disaster, or that person's pulling their weight. And I think the friction between individuals in companies has a disproportionate weight in the perception of its significance than it always is. And sometimes it's actually down to system level or tech stack level or process level. I would say people is obviously everything, but there are other components to this mix that matter with your process, system, organization, structure, tech stack. I think there's fundamentally like deeper strategic issues that often come up that people don't really speak about. I wouldn't say like, when it's a more mature company, I wouldn't go as far as saying like product market fit, which is like more of a startup term. But I would say as companies mature and they're in competitive categories, the differentiation in the market plays a material role on the impact of how everything in marketing and RevOps and sales and go-to-market engineering, they're all impacted. So fundamentally, I always try and go up to understand, is it a fundamental business problem, a challenge with, are they targeting the right ICP? Do they even know who the ICP is? They have lots of customers and they're very broad. But then sometimes you go into the CRM and you're like, half your data is not enriched. Like you don't even know anything about your customers. And then, kind of when did you last do customer interviewing? It's like we don't really do that. Our sales team does that. But like your sales team aren't well suited to interview customers. They're trying to close. They're not trying to understand. Usually, very only the really best sales guys do, but most of them don't. So I'd say like you see the problem is I start pulling on a thread around systems and people, and you see the whole kimono kind of starts to unravel, and you're like, huh. And the problem is that the nature of the problem is unique to each business. That's the problem, is every company has a unique DNA. And what you're trying to do is figure out what are the blocks in this Jenga like tower that they've built as you try and take out the blocks and make sure it doesn't topple to identify where is the biggest hole in the bucket that you can plug. So I wish I had, I do have like a methodology or systemized approach, but the problem is you don't know what shape hole in which part of the bucket is for each org. So you have to go through discovery to figure that out.
And what are the key things to be looking at in that discovery piece? So if I'm just starting off as my first GTM engineering role, what would you say are the main things you'd want to focus on for that audit?
Yeah, definitely, state of the data. What does a tech stack look like? Integration tech stack, skills and capability, planning and strategy. How clear are they? Their level of insight and understanding of, their messaging, their audience, their channel deployment, them even like basic things like, is the measurement set up properly? Sometimes you go into a company and they're double counting on conversions in Google Tag Manager because a script has been pasted twice. And you're like, all the data's wrong just because of something so basic, fundamental, tactical. It's like a hiccup, but no one's was technical enough to look into it. I'd say like technical skills or gap in technical skills is a massive issue across most organizations. And there's a lot of like generalists who are trying to stitch it together, which is a very, very common issue. And I think because the problem there's deep fragmentation in specialist skills now. And part of it is the proliferation of the tech stack. There is no one who knows everything. There is no one who's like a HubSpot expert, a Pipedrive expert, a SO expert, and Salesforce. So it just doesn't exist. It's 280 CRM software. How are you going to find someone who's an expert in all of them? But there's a theory or assumption that they easily translate. And they do, but there's nuances in all the different parts of the tech stack that you got to stitch together. And sometimes you got to learn that, and that takes time because each org has their own unique DNA. But yeah, I'd say like a lot of complaints I hear is like, are we using the best tech stack? And like the funny thing is, in almost every org, they have incredible technology that they pay a fortune for, and it's massively underutilized. And it's like I've never seen an org that is really full, even 80% of utilization of a given software they're paying a fortune for. So it's like a lot of efficiency problems that when you add all the efficiency problems up, you get an effectiveness problem, right?
Yep.
It's the efficiency leads to effectiveness, and that's an issue that a lot of the executives don't see. So yeah, that's kind of like how I view it. I take a top-down approach, not a bottom-up approach, always trying to understand really what the problem is.
And when you think about measuring success of this role of a go-to-market engineer, what would be the KPIs?
Yeah, it varies from org to org. So I think that there's unfortunately few progressive orgs that are really aligning every function in go-to-market to revenue. And I believe everyone should be aligned to the same goal because it's a basketball team and you want to get the ball in the enemy's basket. And when you don't align everyone, you get a lot of friction. So my view is, when you do assign the revenue and align everyone, that's very positive. I feel like I've spoken a fair bit, so I just want to give Tom and Mahak
Yeah.
opportunity to
So
answer as
Mahak,
well.
what would you say are the core KPIs?
Time
Mahak,
saved
time saved.
is going to be a big one. And then ease of use. So when we talk about how well our systems being used, systems might not be set up correctly, like how Oren was talking about. Are we getting the most out of the systems that we have? But are they also set up so that the user knows what to do with them? So you might have the most beautifully set up HubSpot, and I've seen this time and time again, where an agency has come in and they've set up HubSpot or Salesforce with it's pristine. It's got all the best practices in there. It's just not perfect for the company because that's not how the people there work. So those are the two that I think I would look at. Time spent on tasks and each task breakdown, and then the ease of use of the systems that are being set up and the training that goes around them. And I think all of that does go with, so training and enablement. And I think all of that does go with go-to-market engineering and RevOps. And it should be up to both to make sure that anything that is being rolled out is rolled out correctly rather than in more silos, because we all know that that's probably the thing that kills the company the most.
They're working hand in hand.
Mm.
Tom, what are going to be your success metrics?
Definitely time. For me, it's always time and attainment. So like if everyone's hitting their target, I'm doing my job. If everyone's missing their target, I'm probably not doing my job. If some people are hitting their target and some aren't, I might be doing my job. But definitely time saving. I actually have a spreadsheet I can share really quickly and show everyone. So this is what I used at Pavilion when I got started there. You can see it's literally called time savings from automation. So these were some of the biggest automations I built. They might not sound very exciting, but this is the largest automation most people will ever see in their life. It's an absolute beast. The number of seconds they save. So when I started at Pavilion, every member, it took 45 minutes for them to be onboarded because it was done by a human. It now happens in under a second. It's all done by the machine. And this is an approximation of the amount of times that was saving. But you can see that like all those little 1 seconds when you're doing over 4 million of them, they really add up to a lot of people. So from saving no more than 5 minutes per process run, this shows that we were doing the work of 18 people, saving the organization $1 million a year based on a 60K average salary, which is pretty low for the US. And Pavilion only has 25 people in HQ. So you can see that it's like building 72% capacity in every single head. So time is the great equalizer of all organizations. Time is always valuable. The smaller a team, the more impactful time is, but the bigger the team, the more impactful time can be across headcount. If you save one person just a second per working day, that's equivalent to 4 hours per year, and that can add up incredibly quickly. Even if someone's alt tabbing routinely, like from Salesforce to LinkedIn, just integrate them. I frame LinkedIn into Salesforce so they never have to alt tab again. If you save 1 second, it's 4 hours. And very quickly that can add up. If you save I can't do the maths fast enough in my head, but there's a break point where just saving people 1 second is like adding another headcount to the team. So if you're in a 1,000 person company and you save everyone 1 second per working day, you just saved collectively the organization 4,000 hours, which is a lot and is probably equivalent to a couple of heads of people. So it's very vital to always be able to link back to something. And I really liked how Mahak was talking about it earlier with the cost of doing business versus actually making revenue. If you can reduce cost, which unfortunately is reduce headcount, or stop yourself needing to hire people in the future, you've made a massive impact. And the thing I always come back to is like, how much more effective have I made the people through capacity, and how much money have I saved, and how much revenue have I generated? And if I can show all of those things, you just have to look at my LinkedIn to see how quickly I've moved through jobs. Like, it's very easy for me to get another job at another organization, do it again, and like continue to drive my own success forward by making organizations successful.
Yeah, I'd say, just to continue this, I think one of the big contrasts between what Mahek and Tom are describing on revenue operations with, attainment and saving time, I'd say with how go-to-market is kind of popularized with the Clay crowd, it's more traditional lead gen. How many leads are you generating? How many marketing qualified leads are they? How many meetings are you generating? And it's more of a focus on those kind of sales driven metrics and less on the efficiency side of the systems and operations. I'd say that the problem we have is that different organizations have different definitions for the roles. So some people think of RevOps as junior, some of them think of it as strategic, the same thing go-to-market engineering. And because you have that fragmentation, the way it's measured differs based on how you're perceiving the outcome of that person. But I'd say there's definitely a bias towards lead gen, typically across B2B as a whole, than efficiency, automation, workflow. And I think what Tom was showing now, I think is a very progressive view that a lot of companies will develop when they focus on that workflow and automation side of KPI, measurement of revenue operations, and GTM engineering.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Like, are these success metrics going to stay the same, like all about lead gen, or is it actually going to move more into that efficiency with AI? And on that note, I want to go into some quick fire questions just to finish up. So, short answers, please, no more than one sentence. Starting with you, Mahak, what's the most overrated GTM tool right now?
I'm going to get crucified for this, but Fixer, I don't get it. It's everywhere. I hate it. Sorry, guys.
I love this. No, I love this. Oren?
That's funny, because I don't think of Fixer as a GTM tool. I just think of it as a call recorder with a email thingy. But I know it's very common in startups. But yeah, I'm going to say Clay. I'm going to say Clay's not overrated as his capability, but people are paying a ridiculous premium for things that they do that they can do very cheaply in other tools. So I'd say the brand hype to the cost value is overhyped, but the tool itself is great.
So if you're spending a lot with Clay, speak to Oren. Sounds like he could save you a lot of money there.
I did a webinar on that yesterday, so I can send that to anyone interested.
Yes, let's include it. You've got some agreement there from Kartik. Tom, what would you say is?
Clay, for a slightly different reason, very capable tool, number of organizations that can really use the capability. Back to Oren's previous point of like people sit on tech stacks and don't use the horsepower. Like most organizations don't need Clay. Maybe they just need a very small part of it.
Yeah, just great marketing.
Yeah, really great marketing.
And Tom, what do you think is the most underrated metric GTM team should track?
Quota attainment.
Quota attainment. Oren?
Sorry, I was responding to a text. What was the question?
What's the
That's the
most
problem when you're doing
underrated
chat and
metric?
talking at the same time.
What's the most underrated metric GTM team should track?
Oh, underrated metric. And what was the other responses? What did Tom and Mahak say?
I said
Quota
quota
attainment.
attainment.
Was that, sorry, attainment?
Quota attainment.
Yeah.
Quota attainment. And Mahak, what did you say?
I haven't
Mahak?
gone yet.
You haven't gone
Mahak,
yet.
we'll come to you and then Oren can ponder on this.
Yes.
Okay. I've got two. One is the amount of time it takes to do things. Is it taking you 15 minutes of manual work to do things? Get rid of it. And the second one is when you have your tech stack set up, what is the ROI on the way that it is set up? If you have fields in there that no one is using, but it needs to be filled in, get rid of it. So I suppose usability and the usage of fields and setup.
Thank you for that. Gave me a second to think. I'd say data freshness and quality. So the data records, because people are moving jobs at a higher frequency than most people think, and you have very old records sitting there decaying and rotting, and you can't really deploy it. And I think what companies underestimate is like how much money they're sitting on. Like I told someone the other day, and all she does is she interviews lost customers, and she managed to get like a 100K deal revived just because the sales rep didn't was like talking on a monologue, like kind of like I am, rather than actually understanding the prospects need or existing customers need well enough to even offer them the right feature that they already had. So once the person just interviewed them properly and told them they have a feature that meets their need, they recovered the lost account. And so they're sitting on gold dust, but they're so focused on outbound and I think so one thing to say, because we've kind of we've grilled a lot of companies here. We've said like a lot of companies are underutilizing and there's a lot of problem. But part of the problem why this happens, I realized the other day, was the turnover of people in the team in a lot of companies is so high that when you have someone who's worked there for 2 years, aggregated all this knowledge and then leaves, all of that information goes with them. And when you have that across like 30, 40, 50% of a team, the other day I talked to someone, the COO had left, the CEO had left, and the CRO had left, and they've all been replaced. I mean, what's going to happen with that business when you're placed with a C-level leadership team, like and then the CMO is the only person who's like managed to survive 3 rows of cuts because the company's underperforming as a whole. So I'm just saying, like, the reason this is happening isn't like only lack of competence or skills. It's like it's really hard because of the turnover and the knowledge and the specialization required. So
And that
yeah.
comes back into what you were saying about we often blame people versus actually the processes we're using and the foundations. One last question, very quick answers, please. And then I want to come on to Lee's question. So what's one thing you wish every founder understood about go-to-market engineering? Tom, in one sentence.
Can I answer a slightly modified version of the question?
I think you're going to anyway.
I am. I wish every founder understood how to build a company and understood the go-to-market engine.
Oh, we're getting some claps for that.
I've worked for a lot of founders that I've had to educate, but But
That's a good one, though. I like that. Mahak?
you can't succeed in RevOps without someone understanding the revenue engine.
Mahak, in one sentence?
I'm going to go back to the original question on what every founder understands about go-to-market engineering, and it's that it's so new that you can make it whatever you want. We're at this place right now where AI can let you do basically anything. So use your imagination instead of depending on other people to tell you what the way to go, and then find someone to plug those gaps rather than what can you bring to me.
Oren?
Two answers. So the first is they need to hire someone like Tom with a fancy spreadsheet to show them how they're saving costs. That would be a smart move. But the second one is that just because you can hire someone who's young and smart doesn't compensate for hiring someone who's experienced but more expensive. And I think there's such a common mistake I'm seeing, even the other day, that someone really capable, but the person is not thinking strategically. So they have great technical skills, but they're so junior, they can't deliver commercial value. And a lot of businesses are hiring this type of talent because they think that there's a skills issue in the organization, and there isn't. There's a lack of strategic thinking and clarity over how to drive commercial pipeline.
So you're probably investing. Right, we have 2 minutes for a great question from Lee. How far does the panel see go-to-market engineering crossing over into the CS and post-sales world? Because at the moment, it seems very much around supporting sales. Thoughts on that? Anyone want to go?
So I do have a client now. I did this ICP project for them. It's on my LinkedIn profile. It's pinned, so you can go check it out and drop me a DM. I'll send you the framework. But when I ran it for them, one of the realizations was CS is not prioritizing the amount of effort by customer value in terms of the ICP fit. And you kind of go, well, are you saying that they're spending some amount of time for companies the same revenue? No, but revenue is not the only metric that's relevant for your ICP. There's a lot of other metrics that are relevant, like retention, lifetime value, strategic fit, etc. So when you take into account the aggregate to define your ICP, you don't just want it for ABM for marketing. You just want it for outbound for sales. You want your CS team to prioritize the effort to retain the highest value customers.
Yeah.
I'd say go-to-market engineering should already be part of CS and post-sales, as well as pre-sales as well. And that's money left on the table if they're not. Like, you've got the skill set, you know what the process is, they should be in there already.
Yeah. Full funnel, that whole bow tie,
Yeah,
just as Tom was talking about. And I think that's something you want to make really clear at the very beginning. Thank you so much, everyone. That was fabulous and great question there, Lee, as well. Really appreciate your time. I feel this is going to be continually evolving, so I might ask you all to return in a few months and see where we go and see whether we've actually got more than 1,300 GTM engineers, whether that 7,500 RevOps people have actually all pivoted to GTM engineering. So really appreciate your time. I will be sending out the recording, and I'll be sending out some useful insight from the team as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of day.